Why are we doing this again? We did this with Mr. Batman, and...
Do not be afraid.
I'm not so much afraid, but confused. I just don't understand why the hell we have to go and do objective morality again.
Stop getting hysterical, fatty!
Oh, you are lucky I am actually a moral person. Frank Turek again. Is this the same guy we featured with the resurrection myth?
Absolutely!
And we're featuring him again.
Yeah, bitch!
Fine. So we're doing morality again because the last one wasn't all that detailed. And Bats has been showing himself to be very, what's the word? Unchristian-like. Or more not willing to follow any of the teachings of the Bible in rather vulgar and violent ways. He actually got himself kicked off the server I helped moderate. And yes, he's worse than Darth Dawkins in that respect, so I would rather talk about morals with someone that actually has a moral baseline. In the beginning of this video, they show a comment where someone says morality is ingrained in us through evolution. This is how they kickstart the conversation. It's also true. We'll get into that later. So, he's joined by Brandon from the Daily Dose of Wisdom podcast. So, AD, why don't you say hello to him?
Nice to meet ya, bitch!
And yes, welcome to the channel.
Let's get it started!
How do we want to get going on this?
Let's start, is there objective morality?
Sounds good. I also think it's funny Frank just cuts Brandon off there while talking about morals.
Sure.
I think we know that by intuition. When you're old enough to know what murder is and what wrong is, you know that murder is wrong. It's not innate knowledge. You weren't born knowing it, but your mind is structured in such a way based on the fact it's made in the image of God that when you're old enough, if your mind is functioning properly, you know murder's wrong.
Well, yeah, most if not everyone is going to think murder is wrong. But the challenge here is showing how it comes from God and not evolutionary behaviors. What I have found is that most people that argue for objective morality will take an extreme point and point to it rather than taking something they know is easily debated.
Why would it be wrong if there was no God? It would be just your opinion. And if there's no purpose to life, as atheists say, then you can't say here's the right way to live life and the wrong way to live life. Sometimes I give this illustration, particularly on a college campus. I'll say, how do you know that your quarterback throwing a touchdown is better than your quarterback throwing a pick six? That's when he throws it to the other team and they take it back for a touchdown. And people initially don't get it. You know, they say, well, the rules. No, it's not just the rules. The only way you know a touchdown's better than an interception is you know the purpose of the game.
And I love it when the person in favor of objectivity to morality then associates with something completely innocuous. Okay, so let's boil this down a bit. No, there's no purpose for life, but you can give your life a purpose. There is no purpose to a football game. Your life and my life would go on just fine without the NFL or any other game for that matter. It might be a little less entertaining, and that's the purpose we give the game itself, entertainment. So with his analogy, the reason it's better to score a touchdown than an interception is that your opinion is you are going to be entertained if your team wins. But is that objectively the case? When I watch some games, I don't care who wins, and I would be just as entertained with an interception. I would argue that I would even be more entertained with an interception than a touchdown, as the entertainment I see in it is the unexpectedness of the game. Let's take the last Super Bowl. The game was going back and forth with no score in the first quarter, 49ers leading after the second, Chiefs leading after the third. They tie at the end of the fourth. Then they go into overtime. The 49ers score a field goal after failing to get into the end zone. The Chiefs come back, and the 49ers screw up. The Chiefs get in and score 6 to end the game. The Chiefs fans had a party. The 49ers fans went home upset. I thought the ending was amazing because of the back and forth and everything that was going on. Actually, I ended up laughing my head off because I was tuned in at work on a YouTube channel that was cheering on the 49ers, and he was so devastated. Like, completely broken.
You're an irredeemable monster!
Just because I found humor in his reaction?
Of course.
Whatever. But his own analogy is to point to something opinion-based and not objective. Anyway, which is better, a touchdown or a pick six? Well, that all depends on your opinion. Do you want your team to win? Did you place a bet against your team and you want them to lose, so you win the bet? So you see, when he makes this analogy for objectivity, it's still subjective. Not a good start here, Frank.
If there is no purpose to life, you can't say that, say, loving somebody is the right way to live and murdering them is the wrong way to live, because there's no objective to life. Without purpose, you can't determine good or bad, right or wrong. Even from a pragmatic perspective, you can't determine that. So there's got to be a purpose.
Lots to unpack here. I got to give it to Frank, though. He makes some strong statements with a lot of meaning behind them. So he is saying there has to be a purpose to life, else there is no way to have a moral baseline.
Ooh, drama.
But at the start of this, we talked about the evolutionary baseline. He is correct in saying that atheists might say there is no purpose to life. I do. But we do give it a purpose, and we can explain our moral baseline by comparing ourselves to other species that fundamentally act similar to us. If you look at the different species on the planet, they will tend to act in a moderately the same way. Today, we look at colonial, cooperative, and uncooperative species. An uncooperative species example would be the polar bear. Polar bears do not get along well with each other, for the most part. An individual will be territorial, so save for mating and other unique circumstances, they will tend to be seen alone. They can form groups in the warmer months when they are confined to land, but it's more of a tolerance thing. Now, look at a hive species like the ant or the honeybee. Also a colonial species. You will never see a lone ant without a colony, much like you will never see a bee without a hive. And that's the point. The individual doesn't matter, only the colony itself. In that type of system, stop thinking about the beehive as individual bees and start thinking of it as one single entity of the colony itself. Same with the anthill. Each individual of the colony would sacrifice itself for the good of the entire colony without a loss to the colony. Now we look at a cooperative species set right there in the middle of the two. You can also think of this as a pack species. We are a pack species. Each member of the pack is important. One may sacrifice himself to benefit their pack, but the sacrifice is still a great loss. In general, a cooperative species will aid other members of the pack and occasionally take a new member into the pack from outside of that pack. So what does this have to do with morality? Let's take something extreme like killing another member of the same species. The taking of another's life.
Wait, what?
In an uncooperative species, killing is always moral. If the polar bear wants more territory on the ice, they have to go out and claim it by taking the territory of another's and at times killing them. For that species, it's no big deal. For a colonial species, this isn't even thought of. It's immoral and not even considered. Members would rather die protecting the colony than take another colony member's life. In cooperative species, it's a gray area. Yes, I said it, it's a gray area. Killing other members is fine if you have a justification for it. The death penalty in many states is a moral act as punishment for immoral acts. If you can kill out of self-defense, you are not punished for it. If you cannot justify the killing, it is immoral. That's why we differentiate types of killing as manslaughter, murder, and killing out of self-defense. Morality is what is ingrained into you through your evolutionary biology in what will and will not help perpetuate your species and what will and won't bring harm to another member of your species. In general, there are always outliers in all three cases I mentioned. With the uncooperative species, you will at rare times see two polar bears help each other hunt if it benefits them. In a hive, you will occasionally but rarely see a single member of the hive act out of place and go off out on its own. And in our species, you will see someone murder someone else for pleasure or sport. Rare, but it does happen. This is how you have morals without life needing an overall purpose.
Shut the fuck up.
Yes, I've been going on for a bit, though. AD, you need to jump in more often. You were very quiet for almost that whole thing.
Oh, right. Of course.
Let's get back to the video for now. What else did Frank have to say?
We're just molecular machines, in other words. We're just moist robots. If we're just moist robots, then murdering someone, first of all, we didn't make the free choice to do that. We were just compelled by physics or evolution to do that. Or loving them, same thing. It's just what is. It's not an ought. You can't get this ought from biology.
See, this is where the Christian side of the coin just doesn't get it. They focus on the subjectivity of morality and say there is no ought and evolution compels us to do whatever we want to survive.
Kinky.
It's dishonest to say things like what he just did to compel his listeners to favor his version of an ought.
Shame on you.
In plain short language, we ought to do things to aid in the survivability of our species. Murder without cause is not something we ought to do, but someone trying to murder without an ought can be killed, as the ought for the defender is to protect themselves and anyone else the moral outlier could harm.
That's understandable.
For lesser crimes, there is now a punishment to fit the crime: financial or incarceration to remove the person from the rest of the functional human pack.
No, really.
Even in a wolf pack, we have witnessed a member of the pack acting aggressive to the pack, and that member is banished from the rest of the pack. We just happen to put our banished in a cell, telling them to
Get the fuck out.
Audio Demon, that sounded evil as fuck. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Also, maybe not that much queuing in. Anyway, evolutionary biology and pack cooperation gives us the ought for perpetuation of the species, and doing things that promote that are things you ought to do. Things that damage the perpetuation of the species are things you ought not to do. Now, how does this mean that fucking everything in sight to produce more offspring is an ought?
Oh, getting cakey.
No, of course not. We're also a mating species, and that helps us curb the exponential growth that we can experience. But this is getting long. Let's just get to the next clip. The Audio Demon is itching to get more out.
You don't get moral obligations. You might get moral sentiments. You might get, I have this idea that love is better than murder, but you're not obligated to obey love is better than murder if there is no objective moral standard, and there is no good beyond us, and there is no authority beyond us. It's just your opinion. And by the way, even Richard Dawkins will admit this, Darwinism, evolution, is completely all about the survival of the fittest.
Well, yeah, there is no standard. There is nothing physical or anything stopping someone to go against evolutionary biology. But evolution isn't about the individual. It's about the population. And people like Frank is perfectly capable of doing some horrible, nasty things to other people. Like filling their heads with nonsense about the supernatural beings from outside the universe are watching him at all times and have a complete knowledge of everything he does. So if he doesn't behave 24/7 and bow down to say a particular prayer in a particular church to a particular version of a particular God, and if you aren't doing exactly what he says, he will torture you forever and ever and ever. But he loves you. Pure psychological torment for the rest of your life. Anyway, the point here is anyone can do anything they want, technically. But due to evolutionary biology, we are compelled to do things to help promote the species.
That's why he says, I don't want to live in a Darwinian morality, because it is survival of the fittest. Should we kill the weak so the fittest can survive? That's what Hitler did. In fact, he used evolutionary theory in Mein Kampf to advance Nazism.
And look what happened to him. One of, if not the most hated person in known history for the things that he did. And survival of the fittest? That just shows he has no idea what survival of the fittest actually means. So in evolutionary theory, survival of the fittest is about biological changes that in the end aid in successful reproduction. Morality is a different thing when it comes to evolution. Not greatly different, but the idea is that the population wants to help others. There is always going to be a mutation that deviates from the population, and where at times we do kill the weak link, from capital punishment or the death penalty to 90 days in jail to deter repeated behaviors. So yes, we do exactly what Frank is talking about. Maybe not to the extreme all the time, but we have gotten to that extreme. Now, he goes on about that last bit for a few minutes, and disgustingly enough, this is when he decides to pimp his channel out. I won't promote that kind of talk, and I move on ahead once he finishes up.
If there is no God, there's nothing ultimately right or wrong. And if you're going to say that evolution is given your moral sentiments, well, they're just your moral sentiments then. They're not really binding. They're not obligatory. It's just an opinion that you have.
Something correct. Ultimately, right and wrong are also opinion-based. There is no concrete right and concrete wrong. Getting back to what we were talking about earlier, as an example, is it right or wrong to kill another human being? Ask the soldier on the front lines about the enemy, and then ask the doctor about his patient. On both sides of the war, the soldier on the front line thinks what they are doing is right, and killing the other soldier is right. Neither of them want to die. But in the hospital, killing their patient is wrong, and the patient does not want to die. Realistically, there is no true difference in these killings. The soldier does not think the enemy has justification to kill them, and the patient doesn't think the doctor does either. Yet one of them will try, and the other will not. But evolution has given us this pack mentality, where our pack, or in this case, we would all call it our country, is trying to defend itself. Sacrificing your own life for the good of the pack is a compelling part of evolutionary biology. We just do it with weapons instead of teeth and claws. In the Christians' case, they have no moral oughts of their own. There actually is nothing stopping them from going out and mass killing anyone they want in their worldview, because it's not them but God telling them to do something or not to do something. All they have to do is disobey God and sure, kill all you want and then ask God for his forgiveness.
Wait, what?
There isn't anything personally ingrained into them in their view, so morality for them isn't any sort of inherent desire. They're just savages that obey what God tells them to do under threat of eternal torture if they don't. And if they do something terrible, just say you're sorry. And God will send you to heaven anyway, even if you murdered somebody. Okay. Personally, that is no way to live your life.
Not today, Satan!
As for the last bit, where evolution gives us our own thoughts, no. We can still make decisions on our own, on impulse if we wanted. But he gives that comment just off the cuff without any real justification behind it. And claims made without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. There is nothing self-defeating about the atheist gets their moral set. Frank is just coping here. No, I'm going to give him one more comment before we wrap this up. It's a shocking one that may trigger some people. If you think you will be triggered by highly controversial topics, stop the video now, especially if you are Christian. You will not like what I have to say about the next comment. You have been warned.
If you're going to say human flourishing is the standard, you could also ask which humans? The Nazis or people opposed the Nazis? Again, you have no standard by which to judge that. All humans? Who said? You said? What if Hitler comes along and he says, I want to create the Uber race, and I want to get rid of the homosexuals, and I want to get rid of the gypsies, and I want to get rid of the Jehovah's Witnesses, and I want to get rid of the Jews, and I want to get rid of the disabled. I want to do all that.
I warned you. This is your last chance to walk away. I warned you. Okay. And here is where we come into the matter of perspective. Adolf did not think what he was doing was wrong. In fact, he thought he was performing a moral and just act the entire time he was doing the awful things he was doing. From his perspective, we were all in the wrong. Think about it. No one truly evil goes out and thinks what they are doing is evil. They do not think what they are doing is immoral at all. And in fact, the latter comments he made about getting rid of the homosexuals is actively done by the Christian church itself. For a time, they wanted to ban gays from going to church, using brainwashing to convince gays to no longer be gay. The horror stories spoken about those conversion therapy camps, and I can't even talk about here, and I just talked about Adolf. All run by the Christian church and the Catholic Church in an attempt to rid the world of homosexuality. Literally, all the things Frank here has listed are things the Christian church has tried to do at one point or another in the name of God. Yet he says what he just said, naive or outright dismissive of his own faith's actions. Don't believe me?
Ooh, drama.
Listen to this. The punishment for fortune telling in the Bible is death. Leviticus chapter 20, verse 27. The punishment for worshiping a false god or not seeking God is death. 2 Chronicles chapter 15 verses 12 and 13 and Deuteronomy chapter 13 verses 13 to 16. The punishment for homosexuality is death. Leviticus chapter 20 verse 13. As for the disabled, according to Jesus in John chapter 5 verse 14, being disabled is a sin. After he healed the man, Jesus said, "See, you are well. Sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you." I told you I wasn't joking. Biblically, every single thing Frank said and implied is immoral, God commands him to do. So now who's moral? The atheist or the Christian? Remember, you chose to listen to this. You were warned. ACD, how do you feel about all of this?
Okay, I've had one too many emotions for today.
I completely agree. Let's get out of here.
Alrighty, job well done.
I am Corsi, and this is the Fluffy Atheist. If you like this, thumbs up, and please don't forget to subscribe. Share this if you want to share a funny video with friends, or you want to point and laugh. I'm good either way.